Well, welcome everyone. My name is Laura Jones, and I am going to be joined by my other colleagues from CFIB momentarily. And of course, we'll also be welcoming our special guest once she arrives, which is expected in about 15 minutes or so. We'll be joined by the finance minister, and we're really excited about the fireside chat that we're having with her today. Before we get started, I've got a couple of housekeeping notes. The first note is the finance minister. You can imagine how busy she is, so she's a little bit delayed. So that means that we will be running over. This webinar was scheduled for 45 minutes, but we will likely be running to closer to the to a full hour for the webinar. And so she's going to give us the full time, but it's just a little bit, the slot is just moved a little bit, which is good news because we can get through the housekeeping and have more time for your questions. And so a couple of other housekeeping notes. One, I wanted to just, speaking of the questions, you'll see the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and please feel free to use that to ask the minister questions, to ask any of the CFIB colleagues question. Dan is up on the screen now. Corinne will be joining us as well. So, and many of you have been to webinars before, so you're familiar with our faces. For you first timers, welcome. And so also le webinaire aujourd'hui se déroule principalement en anglais. Mais s'il y a des questions en français, nous les poserons et elles seront répondues en français. So we can take your questions and answer them in French if you like. The last piece of housekeeping that I just wanted to mention is that whenever we coordinate events like these with politicians, we sometimes get asked the question, well, you know, kind of whose corner are you in? And so I want to make it very clear that CFIB is a non-partisan organization, and that has been that is part of our DNA from 50 years ago, that's the best way to advocate for small business. So we are in your corner, and we take our positions based on your views from our surveys, and you'll probably hear Dan, Corinne, and I each refer back to your surveys because we have one that's hot off the presses in terms of your reaction to the budget. So we take our direction from you, but we also really cherish these opportunities where we're able to include you in the meetings and give you a direct voice with politicians. And with those few housekeeping items out of the way, I'm really pleased to see Dan. I see you're on the screen now, and I'm really happy to welcome you. We're always glad when you can come on to the webinars. And I know you've been through so many budgets at CFIB, provincial budgets and federal budgets. So maybe you can start us off by telling us a little bit more about both your experience with preparing for budgets generally, but also our reaction to this budget. And then once the finance minister joins us, we can welcome her as well.
Thanks so much, Laura, and welcome everybody. It's really good to be with you on the webinar today. Bonjour tous et toutes. It's so nice to be with people, albeit virtually today. I will say, to Laura's question, it was really nice also for the 2022 budget to be back in person with both journalists, other stakeholders, and finance officials. I never thought I would say that, but it was actually pretty good being locked in a room with a variety of people just prior to the budget, so we at CFIB could prepare our reaction in real time. For those that don't know, on budget day, there are groups that get a bit of a sneak preview so that we can be prepared when the minister starts her speech in the House of Commons. Then we're able to go out and provide live reaction to journalists, having read and perhaps studied the document a little bit more deeply. I'll share with you a few perspectives about the 2022 budget. I just want to say, look, more than anything, I don't often get a chance to be on the webinars, but I've had such incredible positive feedback from so many members about the work that Laura, Corinne, and team do, Jasmin in French, to bring you really good quality content on our webinar series. And we're really happy to have special guests, as we do the Deputy Prime Minister today, to share perspectives on key issues. But as Laura rightly said, the role of CFIB in moments like this is to make sure that your voice is heard. And we do that in a couple of ways. One, we share your voice when we survey you and then take those views to politicians directly, to civil servants. But also moments like this provide an opportunity for you to have your voice directly heard by policymakers by adding questions into the chat function. And we'll make sure that as many as possible get to the Deputy Prime Minister, both in this session and then afterwards. The 2022 budget was a complicated document, and I will say there were a couple of really big points that we liked. One of them was a change that CFIB has been after for years and years and years. You know, one of the founding victories for CFIB, something that we fought for decades, has been the lower rate of taxation for small business. In fact, the lower rate of 9% is available to businesses on the first $500,000 of business income. But for many of our smaller members, they may not be aware that if you are a capital intensive business and you have capital in your business, taxable capital of above $15 million, then you lose access to the small business rate. And that doesn't have to be a giant company. It could be a farm that might lose access to the lower rate of taxation for small business. So for many years, that $15 million capital cap was kept in place. And we had asked governments over and over again to raise that to at least make sure that it has kept up with inflation over decades. In fact, we had recently recommended to the Department of Finance that threshold be raised to $50 million. And to the government's credit, they listened. This budget announces that capital threshold will be raised to $50 million. So you'll still begin to lose access to the rate at about $10 million in taxable capital, but you'll still be able to gain access to the majority of that lower rate. So that's good news, and something we credited the government for listening. And it happened after years and years and years of CFIB lobbying. Our internal motto is that we never give up and we never go away. And that was one of the reasons why I think this victory was able to happen, and a credit to the Deputy Prime Minister for including it in her 2022 budget. The other thing that we were very pleased with in this budget was the changes to the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. You might not think of that as a budget measure, but it was included in this document, as budgets today tackle all sorts of public policy issues, not just financial ones. You know, as small business owners, that one of the greatest issues you're facing right now for many is the shortage of labor. And of the things that governments can do quickly to try to address the shortage of labor, ensuring that there's a new influx of people to Canada to take jobs that perhaps Canadians are not lining up to take themselves is really helpful. The governments, we fought with the Conservatives over this and with the Liberals at various points in time. But the Temporary Foreign Worker Program has been really narrow. And so for retail and hospitality, the service sector, they've not been able to access many positions to fill those positions by temporary foreign workers. We asked for a temporary boost in the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, and the government has changed many of the rules. You can bring in a larger chunk of your workforce in TFWs. You can also, you have fewer restrictions on the types of jobs that they can enter. And a variety of other changes like that. So that was a real positive. I will say, though we have some major concerns, and we do believe that the budget was a missed opportunity to try to provide some relief to some of the pressures that business owners find themselves facing right now. For many, the pandemic's not over. They're dealing with lower revenues or the legacy of a giant amount of debt that has been taken on over the course of the last 2 years. The average small firm, the average member of CFIB, has taken on $160,000 in COVID-related debt. And so even if sales are starting to come back somewhat closer to normal, they're still having to find ways, you're still having to find ways to pay off some of the debt that you've taken on. Now, the Siba loan program was a helpful one. We at CFIB lobbied for the program to be expanded, and Minister Freeland, when she took the role in finance, one of the first things she did was to expand that loan from $40,000 to $60,000. There are almost 1 million businesses that have a Siba loan, most of them at the full $60,000 level. We asked the government to forgive 50% of that loan, so $30,000 rather than the current $20,000. That didn't happen. and our fight hasn't ended. We're still pushing the Deputy Prime Minister on that front. Also, many of this COVID support programs end on May the 7th. I will say, and I know my colleagues, many of you were on a webinar with Laura and Corinne yesterday. Please, if you haven't checked out the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, do check it out. A 10% loss in revenue could give you access to a 50% wage subsidy. But that program ends on May the 7th. The periods end as of May the 7th. You can apply for 6 months back. But we asked that program specifically get continued. That didn't happen. The other thing that members have been promised, you have been promised by this government, by the Liberals, is a reduction in credit card processing fees. That was part of the Liberals' 2019 election campaign. It was also included in last year's budget. And this year, 2022, the budget says that the government's still consulting. And that's true. We have been consulted many, many times about this. But we're disappointed that rather than consultation, there wasn't action. And we're pushing government right now to make good on that election promise. Beyond some of those specifics, many of you have shared with me that you're deeply worried about the size of Canada's debt and the growing deficits that we're seeing for the next 4 years. There's not a plan in this document to get us back to balance. $50 billion deficit this year. And $8 billion even 4 years from now. So we are calling on government to try to ensure that the books of the nation are balanced. The creation of dozens and dozens of new programs, spending increases on almost every line within the budget itself. These are things that worry us as you are facing cost increases on almost every line of your budget. The government increases taxes on carbon. The government's increased taxes recently once again on liquor. We have CPP and EI premiums going up at the end of this year. Look, there's not a lot the government of Canada is going to do to lower the cost of a shipping container from Asia, but there's a lot the government of Canada can do to lower some of the government imposed costs that come along with this. And there wasn't much action on that in this budget document. And so our lobbying will continue on that front. All of these messages have been shared with the Deputy Prime Minister. When she joins us in just a minute or two, we're going to give her an opportunity to speak. And she's about 2 minutes away, I understand. So when she will speak to you about her own thoughts on the 2022 budget, we'll give her that chance. Oh, and there she is. After which, Laura, Corinne, and I are going to chat with the minister briefly. And then, the best part, open it up to you for your questions for the Deputy Prime Minister. I see Minister Freeland has joined us. It is so nice to see you virtually. You know, one of the things that I was reflecting on, Chrystia, as you've asked me to call you by your first name, one of the things I've reflected on is that we've only met once in person, and I think that was at a conference in Brussels. And I'm really looking forward to being able to have a face-to-face dialogue with you at some point soon. I just want to note, as I introduce the Deputy Prime Minister, that one of the things that I've really appreciated is the frank and regular discussions that CFIB has been able to have with Minister Freeland, with the Deputy Prime Minister throughout the course of the pandemic. I sent her a lot of emails, and at various times throughout the pandemic, I've had a phone call, and if it's coming from a number that I don't recognize, it's either duct cleaning or the Deputy Prime Minister. I'm never quite sure which one, but I take both those calls, and it's been very often Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. We're so happy to have you with us. I just want to say, you know, we've had a few battles over a few issues, but through the pandemic, lots and lots of discussion about areas of complete agreement. And I will say many of the support programs, while imperfect, have been incredibly helpful to so many of our members across Canada. Je suis très heureux d'être avec vous aujourd'hui et de vous présenter notre invitée d'honneur, la vice-première ministre et ministre des Finances, l'honorable Chrystia Freeland. J'ai eu plusieurs conversations avec la ministre Freeland depuis le début de la pandémie. J'apprécie qu'elle prenne le temps de discuter avec le FCEI pour expliquer certaines de ses décisions et qu'elle soit à l'écoute de nos recommandations et de nos points de vue. Nous sommes heureux, Madame le vice-premier ministre, que vous preniez le temps de faire une présentation et de répondre aux questions des membres de la FCEI aujourd'hui. Et je vous remercie encore une fois pour votre disponibilité. So it is so good to see you, Chrystia, and I welcome you to share a few words with our members. We have hundreds, if not, I think we had 1,000 or more registrants for this webinar. So you've got lots of small business owners in front of you, and I'll turn the table over to you and hear from you now. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much, Dan. Thank you, everyone who has joined us on this Thursday afternoon before the Easter long weekend. Sorry also to be late. I am joining you from Calgary, and I was actually out at a great CCUS facility where I saw some amazing inventors. Actually very, very in a very great mood because I'm really excited about the inventions, the engineering, the entrepreneurship, a really exciting sector. So anyone who's here from that sector, I look forward to hearing your thoughts and questions. Ça me fait tellement grand plaisir d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. Merci pour votre temps et je m'excuse que je suis en retard. Merci Dan que vous avez organisé ça. Et comme Dan a juste dit, on n'est pas toujours d'accord, mais on travaille en étroite collaboration et on a une communication très ouverte, très efficace. So, you know, yeah, as Dan said right at the beginning, we may not agree about everything, but as I'm sure all of you know, Dan is a very effective advocate for you. He always answers the phone when I call. And I find also, you know, Dan is very good at being clear about what you all need. And that makes it easier for me to work with you. So thanks, Dan, and thanks, everyone. Let me just say a few very, very quick high-level thoughts about what's in the budget and what might be of particular interest to small business. I would say, you know, for me, a very important small business measure in the budget was one of the, probably the flagship tax measure, which was phasing out access to the small business tax rate more gradually, so that access will now be phased out when taxable capital reaches 50 million rather than at 15 million. That was something that we decided to do. It's quite an expensive measure, but that was something we decided to do because one of the things I have heard from Dan and from small businesses across the country is, you know, the government believes, and we really do, that we want to encourage small businesses to get bigger. And that is definitely an objective. You know, you want to grow, we want to help you to grow. And the tax system as we had it prior to this change really created actually quite an artificial disincentive for you to grow. So I'm glad we have that in here. I would say the other couple of things that I'd like to highlight are really very much based on conversations with all of you, conversations with Dan. We've extended the Siba repayment deadline until December 31st, 2023. And that really is in recognition of the fact that getting through COVID has been hard. You've done a phenomenal job, by the way, and thank you for that. Thank you for your resilience. And just to give people a little bit of extra runway. I would point out also, just a few weeks before the budget, we launched the Canada Digital Adoption Program. This is a really good program, and I would urge people to take a look at it, see if it can work for your business. It's about providing a little bit of capital and some direct support to help small businesses adopt new technologies. I know that's something a lot of businesses began to do more aggressively during COVID because, the situation forced you to. And this could help you really lean in to that. There is also, one of the things that I made a point of doing in the budget, and I know not all small businesses are enthusiastic about this decision, but it was important for me in the budget to be clear that the period of extraordinary COVID support was over, to turn the page, to shift gear to a new approach. I do know that, or at least in my experience, small business people tend to really understand the importance of fiscal responsibility. That was a very important theme for me in the budget. And this shifting of gear was really the foundation of that. Having said that, there are significant measures, not new ones, but significant measures still in place to provide that runway of support. The support for hardest hit industries, tourism, and hospitality in particular, that support is in place until May 7th. And there is $750 million in programs that were announced last year in 2021 to support the tourism sector in particular, because we're aware that, that was a particularly hard hit area. And then, the only other thing to mention, and this is something where we sort of got the ball rolling in the budget of last year, but that is going to go into effect this summer, is the Canada Small Business Financing Program. We will increase annual financing to small businesses by nearly $600 million. So there should be there will be some additional support available there. So those would be kind of my headlines. And I'm now happy to hear your questions. I can't hear you, Dan.
Yeah, sorry. It's 2022 and I'm still keeping myself on mute. I thought that I would have licked that some time ago. Thanks so much for the opening comments, Chrystia. It's good to hear some of the things that you've referenced. Many of those are the highlights. Just before you arrived, I shared some of the good news from our perspective in the 2022 budget. Also, some of the areas that we were still seeking for some action. And I think Corinne, Laura, and I are going to share a couple quick questions with you to open this up, and then move right into our member questions. From there, Corinne and Laura will animate that session with you. The thing that I guess I wanted to just note, and you and I have spoken about this several times in our telephone chats, is the worry that our members are facing right now from rising costs. You spoke a second ago about the fact that small business owners tend to be quite concerned about the treasury of the government of Canada. They know that today's deficits are tomorrow's taxes. And so many of them have shared with us that they too do not want to see these COVID support programs last forever. They recognize that they're costing future generations loads of money to do just that. So while we at CFIB have advocated for COVID support programs, this isn't our preferred way of doing business. Businesses are looking to replace subsidies with sales. But as we come out of COVID, the costs, as you well know, the costs, consumers are struggling with the affordability of so many things, but so are small business owners. Almost every line of a business's budget is under huge pressure, including some of the areas over which government has some control. So we know, of course, a flagship program of importance to your government has been carbon pricing, and carbon taxes are rising. They rose rapidly this year. We saw the liquor tax escalation go into effect again in April. We have a CPP premium increase again this January. Now we will have the end of the 2 years, very helpful freeze that you put in place on EI premiums. But as that ends, now EI rates will be going up at the end of this year. Small firms are wondering what can be done about some of the costs that they are facing. We know that not all of the costs that businesses have are controlled by government or influenced by government, but some are. And any relief would be welcome. Is there anything you can share with our members on that front?
So look, let me make a couple of points about sort of the connected challenges of affordability, inflation, rising costs. And I do want to start by saying something which I probably should have said in my opening comments. And that really is, I really want to say thank you. We are going into the Easter weekend, what my family calls English Easter, because Ukrainian Easter is next weekend. And it's a time for reflection and thinking about renewal. And I do think, I don't for 1 minute want to minimize how hard the challenges of today are. But I do want also to take a moment to thank everyone on this call for all the hard work they did to get through the challenges of the past 2 years, and to really reflect on the extraordinary nature of those challenges. When COVID hit, we had a 17% fall in GDP. 3 million people lost their jobs, many of them people who work for you. And then in the months afterwards, this, I am sure horrible to experience and impossible to plan around cycle of opening up and closing down again and opening up and closing down again. And I can only imagine how stressful all of that was, how really, I think uncertainty is one of the hardest things for human beings to deal with. And it was a time of extreme uncertainty. I have to say, one of the things that I really observed across the country is the degree to which small businesses really thought about their employees and their customers first. I really saw people thinking about how could they make things work so they could keep as many people working as possible. People who provide essential services to their communities really feeling a duty to continue to do that. So I really do want to say, I have not forgotten how hard this was, and I'm grateful to you all. And I think it's worth reflecting on, basically what you did worked. And again, I in no way want to minimize the challenges we're still facing, but compared to where we could have been, employment in Canada is now 115% above where it was when COVID first hit. And it's not automatic that we should be there. The US is at 93%. Our unemployment rate is 5.3%. That is the lowest it has been in 5 decades. It's actually the lowest it has been since comparable data started to be collected. And when you think about that compared to 5 million people losing their jobs, that's enormous. And the economy is bigger than it was before COVID hit. And that is really, it sounds like, the economy, but actually it means all of you are actually doing even more. than you were doing before COVID hit. Nonetheless, the challenges that Dan outlined, those are real. What can we do about it? Here I would say the first obligation that I think I have that the federal government has when it comes to an environment of elevated inflation is to pursue a fiscally responsible set of policies. The high inflation environment really does put a premium on that kind of an approach. And that's why it was so important for me to take a fiscally responsible approach. That means being careful about what I spend. It also means being careful about maintaining a revenue base. And again, there, I know that that may not be exactly what people want to hear, but for us to return to our inflation target, a fiscally responsible fiscal policy is a key element of that. And I know that, and that's why it was really important for me to put forward a fiscally responsible budget. And I do also have a lot of confidence, as I think we all should, in the Bank of Canada. Canada has a strong institutional framework, and I think we should be confident the Bank of Canada is going to do its job and get inflation back to target. And that is going to be the answer to the pressures everyone is now feeling with an environment of elevated inflation. I do also want to point out, and again, you know, this is kind of cold comfort, but the inflationary pressures we are feeling today are principally global in nature. Higher energy prices. This is really about Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine. Constrained, snarled supply chains. This is about a COVID readjustment, and more recently, it's about China's zero COVID policy. Prices, high prices for agricultural commodities. Again, this is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so I really, I am so aware that pointing to global drivers of the challenges we face may not be the most comforting answer. But I do think it's important to diagnose the problem accurately, because otherwise we won't put forward a good solution. One area where I do think you're feeling pressure, where I do think that we can help and have tried to help in the budget, is labor shortages. Something I hear from small businesses across the country, including in my own riding, kind of directly getting in touch with me, is that this is a real challenge. And here, I think the federal government can and should help. You saw the action that we took on temporary foreign workers just ahead of the budget. And I am confident that that will be helpful. I will also say, you know, on labor shortages, I see addressing labor shortages effectively as one of Canada's most powerful competitive advantages in the global economy. If you're feeling bad about labor shortages in your business, call up a friend in the US or in Europe, and you'll feel a little bit better. Because while we have a challenge, their challenges are graver. And the big difference is we are a country that is able to accept immigrants and welcome them. We understand that that is a valuable driver of economic growth. And our government continues to set high immigration targets, partly, but not only, to make up for that shortfall we had during COVID. We also really recognize that if we want to be a growing country, and my view is it is great for Canada to grow. We have the fastest growing population in the G7. That is a strength. If we want to continue that, we need to have more homes. We have to have a country where we're building houses quickly enough to accommodate that population growth. That is not the case today. And that's why really the centerpiece of the budget is significant investments in housing so we can keep up with a growing population. I see these as measures that are really about helping all of you, because if the government can be sure we have the workers that you need, that is going to help you create the economic growth that our country needs.
Thank you very much, Chrystia. Corinne, I think you were going to go to you for a question next.
That's right. Hello, Minister Freeland. Nice to see you again, and thank you again for joining us today. So we did get a lot of questions that came in before. We asked people as they registered for questions, and a lot of themes, of course, came out of this that you're going to hear from, I think, Dan, Laura, and I. So we're going to sort of lump a bunch of those questions together. But we also did a survey earlier this week that actually looked at, so how far along have businesses come after the pandemic? And our latest data actually showed that only 42% are still back to normal revenues. So we're still talking the majority of business, small businesses at least, are not yet back to full revenues or pre-pandemic revenues. And 2/3 of them do have pandemic-related debt. And we know that's, as Dan said earlier, that's on average about $160,000 per small business. And we're hearing from many members like Mohammed, Travis, Sandy, Joanna, Emmanuel, Phil, Charlene, all of these folks talked about the debt that they're still carrying. And many of them have questions around Siba. In fact, the most voted up question so far in this webinar came from Sandra, who said she's interested in hearing if any movement is being considered on the Siba loans. And that's really where a lot of the focus around the debt that people are carrying is. And that's going to be one question. So just park that for a second. And then the second is related to the fact that a lot of businesses, though, are still facing hardships. Again, we got a lot of folks talking about how they're still not out of the woods. This is still a difficult time for them, that they're worried about the ending of supports. We're entering another wave. While restrictions are not being imposed, people are not coming in like they were because they're afraid, right? And so the volumes are just not there. And I think with the supports coming to an end on May 7th, there is a growing sense of worry about what happens next. So what is your government prepared to do to help those businesses deal with their pandemic-related debt? And specifically, is there anything on Siba? We'd love to see, for example, an increase in the forgiveness portion of Siba from the 1/3 it is now to maybe 50% or more for those hardest hit businesses in particular. And what else can we do to help those businesses feel a bit more assured? Because so many of them, their stress levels are very high. And so if you could sort of speak to the debt side as well as what else can governments do to help them through this next phase, I think that would be really helpful. And the last piece is those new businesses, that core group that never had any support throughout the entire pandemic, who are still wondering if there's a way that they can get any help at all. So those, I know it's a lot, but that sort of covers a theme that we see quite often right now.
Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, I joined Dan in being one of the people who, even after 2 years of COVID. Okay, so let me sort of try to go through some of that. And I will say, I'm not going to surprise any of you guys. I am not going to make any news today. So I'm not going to announce any brand new programs. But, I want to have a chance to explain a little bit the thinking behind the programs we've put in place already. And crucially, the most useful thing for me about this conversation is to hear from you. So let me talk a little bit about the stuff you've raised. On COVID and what happens next. I do know that is on the minds of a lot of us. I have my mask with me and I wore it into this room, and I think we still need to be careful. One thing that I think Canadians should again be reassured by is the very high levels of vaccination in our country. And, we are Canada is not pursuing the zero COVID strategy we're seeing in China. I am very certain that our approach is the right one. So we have to figure out a way as a society, as a country, to live in a world where COVID exists. And I think as a country, we've been really smart by getting vaccinated. And vaccination, we've learned, it doesn't fully stop COVID, but it certainly has made it a virus that we can much more effectively deal with. So take comfort from that. If you haven't had your booster, get your booster. I have now had all 3 of our main COVID vaccines. I've had AstraZeneca, Moderna, and Pfizer. I don't know how that happened, but there you go. And I know that in some parts of the country, there are recommendations for people to get, depending on what category you fall into, to get that 4th dose, that second booster. And I say this because, we should have the comfort that comes from knowing we're in a pretty good place, nearly 90%. But also, collectively, we can help ourselves by getting as many Canadians vaccinated as possible. It will add to the confidence that you spoke about, Corinne, and it will actually minimize the consequences of subsequent waves. The other thing that we have, and it's important for people to know this too, because so much economic activity is a matter of confidence. The other tool that we have that we didn't have earlier is very effective therapeutics. Therapeutics that if you do get COVID and you're in a high risk group, these are medicines that prevent you from getting really sick and dying. People need to be aware of those. And again, at a sort of business confidence level and a consumer confidence level, really, I would urge people to do everything that we can to use the tools we have to handle COVID and to be confident that we have those tools. On the business debt, I am very aware that that is something people are thinking about. That's why I started right off the top talking about the Siba extension. I'm very glad that we did that. It does give businesses breathing space until December 31st, 2023. Beyond that, let me just say, I hear you, and let's keep on talking. And I would say the same thing when it comes to your question about new businesses. But broadly, yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you for listening. And I think it's an important message that we're hearing loud and clear here today. And I'm glad that you say that you've heard it. So thank you. And hopefully that can be something you can consider going forward to help them deal with their debt. So I'll turn it over to Laura.
Thanks. Well, maybe I'll come up behind you a little bit, Corinne, on this, just because I think that it's one thing to survive the storm, and it's another thing to clean up after the storm. And I think that's where small businesses feel that they're at. And Corinne mentioned the 2/3 carrying COVID debt, which is a big stress for many, many members. She talked about 45% not being back to, only 45% being back to normal sales, but also 80% are telling us they haven't recovered from the stress. And, stress isn't something that business owners pre-COVID, it wasn't even something we asked our business owners about. It wasn't something that business owners complained a whole lot about. It was just part of the normal course of things. But like many Canadians, of course, the last 2 years have been extraordinarily stressful. And I think, the second most voted question here was Tom's comment. He's a movie theater owner saying that very grateful for federal support for the past 2 years, but not sure that they can survive at 50% business level without some continuing support. And a lot of businesses are, I think, hoping for more debt forgiveness as a result of that. So I'll leave that and pivot to Janet and Vicky, who have similar questions. And both Janet and Vicki are saying that small business owners like us would like to know where we stand on government's priority list. As finance minister, you have the unenviable job of juggling a lot of different priorities. And you know, Dan talked about costs being at the top of the list for our members. Taxes and tax relief is right up there with costs. Labor, you talked about labor shortages. I'll also put red tape on the list, one of my personal favorites, but you mentioned the temporary foreign worker program, and many members have told us that they're happy about the changes, but the program itself is costly and difficult to deal with because of some of the red tape with the program. So I'll just repeat Janet and Vicki's question. You know, where do small business owners sort of stand on your government's priority list?
Those are great questions and observations. I'm going to start with the point about stress. And that's sort of why, Laura, I wanted to really make a point of thanking small business owners for getting through the pandemic. I guess, you know, as a country, we all sort of have PTSD right now. And it's important to recognize it. It's important to take a moment to remember how much we've been through over the past 2 years. And I do want business, you know, owners to hear from me such a heartfelt thank you very much, such a heartfelt recognition of how hard it has been. You know, I talk to so many people who will sort of say to me, there is something, there's a particular kind of stress that comes from worrying, will you be able to keep your business? The business that you've worked so hard to create, maybe the business that your parents worked hard to create and you're so proud to keep it going. The business that you know, like personally employs 3 or 4 or 5 people and you know how important it is to them, that's a part of your community. And, you know, it's not, I know that for so many people, it has been not just a question of what is the bottom line at the end of the month. It has been a very emotional roller coaster. So I just want to say thank you so much. I want to recognize how hard it has been. And again, without in any way minimizing how hard it has been, I do want to say to people, like, you've done a great job. You really have. And again, without minimizing the challenges ahead, if I had had a crystal ball in March of 2020, and I had seen us economically being where we are today, I would have considered that an unbelievably good outcome. So that's, you know, just thank you. On where do small businesses stand? Again, there, I want to be really clear. From my perspective, small businesses are the heart of our communities and the heart of our economy. Small businesses provide the lion's share of jobs in our country. And they're really, you know, I see them as really being at the heart, kind of the woof and weave of our society. Canada really is the structure of our economy is very much built up out of small businesses. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a source not only of economic strength, but also of social and political and community strength. I think it's one of the reasons that we have a pretty cohesive society, that Canada kind of works. You know, again, I will say to small businesses, I recognize that I will never do every single thing you would like. And one of the interesting things about being finance minister is I realize I will never, not only will I never satisfy everyone, I have now reconciled myself to the fact that I will probably never fully satisfy anyone. And the challenge of kind of finding a path that is the right one for the country and balances the needs of everyone. Sometimes when I think about it, I realize I can't even find a path that, say, keeps my whole extended family happy. And everyone in my extended family now feels like they are like a policy leader in the country, and that it is their role to share with me the correct path for Canada. And guess what? They all kind of disagree with each other, you know, some a lot, some a little. And so I realize if I can't find a path that is 100% agreed with by everyone in my family, I won't be able to do that for the whole country. And kind of, I would say, I'm sorry, like I love small businesses. I would love to be able to satisfy every single thing that you think you would like to see the federal government doing, but I recognize I'm not doing that and I never will. What I will say to you is, I am always mindful when putting together the budget, when advancing policies, I am mindful and thoughtful about what they will mean for small business.
Well, thanks very much for that. And I think the main, one of the main messages that we want to convey is that things look, I think, a lot more normal on the surface than they really are for small businesses. And I know that and we appreciate you coming today to hear directly from small businesses, because I think that that's very critical. And one of the things that we said is we know we won't get to all of the questions, but we will provide them to you just for our members, so they know that the questions will go to you and your staff, so that you'll have also the other comments, because I know we find that very helpful as we advocate on behalf of businesses, and you will too. Dan, I think you have the next question.
Yeah, I just if we have time to squeeze in another quick one. I know your time is going to run out very shortly, and we've indulged our members a little bit longer. Thank you for sticking with us. There were quite a few questions on the cost side about carbon taxes, and there's one from Tiffany related not to the carbon tax specifically, but the rumors that are out there about a potential tax on trucks. The other is one from Samantha. Samantha asks about, as a farmer, some of the carbon tax impact that she's seeing on her operation, and there's a half dozen more. I wanted to ask, and I spoke to you shortly before, I think just a couple of days before the budget, and flagged that as you announced the next tranche of the carbon tax system, the worry is that while consumers have rebates for their carbon taxes, businesses, the programs that were put in place earlier for small businesses really didn't work, didn't roll any money back to the business community. And we have lots of our members, even those that really, we have members that don't believe in carbon taxes altogether, but even those that do believe in carbon taxes and think that it is an important thing are unhappy that there's no rebate to the small business of the money that they are spending on that front. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that, because with prices increasing anyway, one assumes that would have a dampening effect on Canadians' appetite to purchase carbon intensive fuels. Do we need this increase in the carbon tax? And is there a way, if we do, to get some of those dollars back to all the small businesses? I noticed in the budget that there was, I think, some notice of doing that for export, carbon intensive export related businesses, but for the average business that does consume carbon as part of their operations, any hope for them of seeing some of that money come back in other ways?
Yeah, okay, no, thank you very much for the question. And what was the name of the farmer, Dan?
Samantha was,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so hi, Samantha. As I mentioned, I'm in Calgary. I know we have farmers across the country, but we have a lot in the prairies. So maybe you are in Alberta too. And if so, a special hello to you. I am very aware of the concerns that farmers have around the price on pollution. And we have taken action, particularly around grain drying, to return money to farmers. So I hope people are aware of that, and I am confident that will make a difference. I do also want to say, especially to farmers, and I'm glad there's a question from farmers. We really need you. We always need you, but we especially need you this year, and the world needs you this year. I am really worried that one of the terrible consequences of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine could be dreadful food shortages in the fall. And, you know, Canadian farmers are needed more than ever. So just please know how important your work is. I know that farming, of course, is about providing for your family. But this year, more than ever, it is about feeding the world, and the world knows it. On price on pollution and small businesses, actually, there are measures we're taking in the budget, which I'd be happy to talk about it at greater length on the technical side of things with you, Dan, later on. But we do believe that it's important to return, you know, the idea of the price on pollution is for it to be revenue neutral. This is not a revenue raising measure. It is about creating economic incentives, so light touch, you know, not about a lot of government regulation, to help us all make that transition to the green economy. And so that does include returning money to small businesses. I actually agree with you, Dan, that the approach needs to be less cumbersome. And we have measures in the budget to do exactly that. And I'm happy to talk to you, you know, at greater length afterwards about that.
Well, look, thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Chrystia, for your time this afternoon. It is really good to see you. You're in one of the cities in which I've spent a lot of time in Calgary. I lived there for about 10 years. Great place. I wish I were back sometimes. I just want to say, look, we have a good and frank ongoing discussion, and several of these items that are there that were raised by members that we haven't got to, we will ensure at CFIB that we raise them with your office, and then for me to raise some of them with you directly. So apologies to members for your question. Some of them we didn't get a chance to get to. We had loads and loads of them prior to the webinar even starting. I also want to say, as one Ukrainian Canadian to another Ukrainian Canadian, I just want to say Christos Voskres for a happy Easter to you and your family, and a happy Easter, Passover, and a blessed Ramadan to our members that are on this call right now. I gotta say, I only have 2 fast days, and I have great respect for anybody that has 40 fast days or a whole month of fast days, sorry, to get through. But thank you very much to the small business owners that have joined us on this call, and thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for joining us today.
Okay, well, thank you, Dan. And I will say, voistinu voskres. And, you know, likewise, Laura rightly pointed out to the stress we've all been living through. And there are many faiths in Canada that are in a season of reflection and renewal and celebration. And we need it maybe this year more than ever. And so, you know, I'll join Dan in wishing people best wishes for Passover and Ramadan Mubarak. And thank you very, very much for your time. Looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks so much. And thank you for everyone for being on the webinar with us today. That's it.
Yeah, and again, sorry to be late. Thanks for your time.